Hey, how's it going? Look, it's another episode. And before I get into the films, I just want to say thanks for checking this out. Thanks for listening. If you're new to the show, new to what we do here, look, all I do is I watch new films, films that are new to me. I've watched plenty of films over my lifetime now. And while I'm not super old, it's been long enough that I've put a few thousand films behind me now. And I still got a lot more to go. So, this is the journey, right? Just working on that watch list, trying to see films that I either ignored or overlooked, or just put off for whatever reason. So here's a chance to get into them. I looked at a couple of films that are based on what do we call it? Like reporters or reporting journalists. Trying to break a story, trying to crack the case, find the facts, chase down the clues, all that. One of the films that I think is pretty high up in my favorite films is All the President's Men. And I think that is one that, look, if you are familiar with it, if you understand how important it is to U.S. history, to American culture even, I think you understand. Like, that's a really good film. It really set the bar in a certain genre of films. And ever since then, there have been other films that have come out since then that kind of follow a similar pattern. I recently just happened to watch, I watched Spotlight. That's another one that it's not really the like pair of investigative journalists, but it is like the team at the Boston Globe trying to crack that story on all the priests and the church and all that. Another one actually that comes to mind, even though it's not really the same kind of thing, it's close to it. It's adjacent, is Shattered Glass. Have you ever seen that? It's one of the few films that I think stars Hayden Christensen, from the Star Wars prequels and all that. And he's actually really good in it. And Hank Azaria is really good in it, I think. And it's about the story of, I think it was Stephen Glass, who was a young journalist. And turns out he'd made some of these kind of hard-hitting, insightful, kind of controversial stories. He just made them up, fabricated a lot of either, sources, or some of the things that the sources would have said. So that was an interesting take on this type of genre. But I did want to look at some more recent things that I've been meaning to get to. The first one was She Said from 2022, and that is about a pair of New York Times journalists. They're getting clues and they're hearing things about something going on with Harvey Weinstein, right? So they're talking to people, they're trying to get down to what really might have happened and who it might have happened to. The thing is, with this film, it blurs the line between the film and reality, if that makes sense. Because you have, in the film, you're talking about people who are involved with making films. And so whether it's Harvey Weinstein himself or some of the actors that are reported victims of Harvey Weinstein, I mean, even Ashley Judd appears in the film as herself, not as another character. She appears in the film as herself. And it's talked about, like Gwyneth Paltrow comes up, Rose McGowan comes up, but it also focuses on other people that weren't high profile, weren't known names, people who were in that orbit where there's like a character portrayed in the film as a PA, like a production assistant on some film that just kind of got scared out of the business by the whole thing. And it's one of the things where it's like, okay, well, we're trying to tell the story about the journalists and the work they do, but also just hanging over the whole thing is the real events and the real people involved. And it was such a high profile case. I mean, it really sparked and pushed forward the whole Me Too movement, right? Fortunately, I think the film takes the right approach to handling or representing Harvey Weinstein himself. He's kind of like the shark in Jaws in a way. There's a lot of talk about him throughout the whole movie, and he doesn't show up until the very end. And it's not the actual person himself. It's an actor. We never see his face. We just see a man in some of the scenes from behind. Kind of has the same build and profile, I guess, but it's not him. And so I think that's at least giving us a little sense of like, this is real because you recognize this person from afar, from a distance, but we're not going to give him the dignity of appearing in a film. That, plus I think by the time this film is made, that monster is already up in prison somewhere, right? So fine, good. I didn't need to see him. But the thing is, I think the film, beyond the work of the journalists, beyond the actual story that they broke with the people that were involved, I think the longer lasting effects of their work are changes to the film industry, hopefully, changes just to workplaces in general. So in that respect, I feel like the film is at least showing us the tip of the spear, right? Like this is what kind of started it all. And this is the work that it took to overcome some of these people really trying to sweep this under the rug and cover for the man and kind of make this stuff go away on the regular. And these two journalists were able to really line things up in the right way where it's like, there's no denying this anymore. There's no getting around this. You can't run from this any longer. So I thought it was really well done. You know, the two leads is Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan. They bring a real sense of principle and intelligence. And I like that it feels authentic. It feels real. It feels like we're really watching the dedication of these journalists to bring this story to light. After that, I saw another film called Shock and Awe. This is directed by Rob Reiner and actually stars Rob Reiner. He's in the film, but the two main journalists, we have another pair here, is Woody Harrelson and James Marsden. And they play two journalists. The whole thing is set around Knight Ridder, which is a news service, right? It's not one particular publication, but it's a news service that pushes out stories to publications, magazines, newspapers all around the country. So here they are. I mean, the film starts with 9/11, essentially. It starts with the events from that day, the immediate response by the government to figure out what happened, who's responsible, and what do we do next, right? And these journalists are fully aware of some of the players, like on the world stage, like who could have done this and where it seems like this originated from, who's responsible, all that kind of thing. And they, I mean, rightly so, I suppose they figure out or they deduce that this was probably Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And I think a lot of people even, you know, from what I remember, a lot of people seem to line up with that, to think like, yeah, that does seem kind of on the nose. Like that is probably who's responsible. And then when I think they actually claim responsibility, then it's like, all right, well, that's who we go after. We're going to have a fight now. Let's take the fight to the right person. But these journalists are watching as the country, the Bush administration in particular, they start to steer towards Iraq. And on the false pretense that there are weapons of mass destruction there, right? Like Saddam Hussein, who is still in power, he's got it in for us and he's building the right kinds of weapons to bring it to us. And I think looking back, everybody can recognize like that wasn't the case. And going there and getting into, you know, years of conflict and war and all the lives that were lost really wasn't necessary, you know? Come on. So, you know, this film tries to show that not everybody believed where the country was going was the right thing to do. And these journalists were really trying to understand and get down to the facts of, wait, what is going on here? Like, the government is saying this is who is responsible and this is where we're going to go take the fight. But nothing lines up with that. You know, they talk to real intelligence people. They talk to real military people. And they didn't just follow whatever spokespeople were saying or the PR line of the reason to go to war with Iraq. So here, I think this film tries to show us, like, the whole time, there's always been a voice of disagreement, maybe, on what is really actually happening and what the truth is. You know, the only thing I'll say about the film in itself is there's something about it that I can't quite put a finger on, but there's something about it just feels real. It just gives TV movie vibes. And I don't know if it's like the acting, because we have a solid cast, or maybe the something about like the production quality or the camera work. I don't know. There's something about it. It just feels like it has kind of a light touch. It feels kind of soft around the edges, you know? Like, this is not All the President's Men, and this is not Spotlight. This is not a movie that is showing the fight. I mean, these characters, we only know that they have a certain perspective on this and they believe certain things because they say it, not because we're actually seeing it. And maybe it's a little hard to explain, I guess. But the thing is, at the end of the film, or by the time we get to the end of the film, it just feels like kind of preachy. It just feels like so on the nose. Like, we're not seeing a lot of it. We're being told a lot of it. And in that respect, I don't know. I just, I couldn't quite get behind it, you know? Because, I mean, look, I lived through that. I lived through the time. I lived through those events and that whole moment in American society where we didn't know if this was really the right thing to do, but this is what was happening, even if you disagreed with it. So, you know, I guess the idea is to show that those people did exist. There were people that believed this was not the right thing to do. Now, whether their voice was heard or not, I mean, clearly that didn't seem to be the case because the country went in a different way. And so, look, the final film I watched for this group was The Program from 2015. And that was a film that, in a similar way, it's about a journalist trying to get down to the truth of the story, but it's really from the opposite perspective. You know, this is the film that's stars Ben Foster. He's playing Lance Armstrong, the world champion cyclist. And it's really showing us the story from Lance Armstrong's perspective. I mean, it really is about him and his, I mean, you could say dedication, but also his, I mean, basically just his cheating all the way to the top. And it paints an interesting picture of the man himself. You know, I don't know how accurate it would be in light of everything that happens, but it doesn't seem like he's necessarily a bad person. It seems like things get out of hand and a lot of it goes to his head. But it seems like he is someone who is just committed to being the best and to winning. And, you know, look, he takes too many shortcuts. He breaks too many rules. And there's even a point where we see like, oh, he could have left the whole thing a champion and nobody would have ever known. But whether it's pride or greed or whatever, he pushes it a little too far and it all comes out, everything falls apart. The whole time, though, this is the thing that the film tries to show us. There are journalists, and specifically one journalist, it was David Walsh, who was following him ever since he kind of broke onto the scene of the cycling world and really stuck with his progress as an athlete to the point where when he started winning back to back to back, and he won, I think, 7 in a row, or at least 7 in total, the most to do it at that point, he was the one that was like raising the red flag of like, something's going on with this guy. Like, how is this guy all of a sudden Superman? Like, just a few years ago, he was a cancer patient. And hey, kudos to getting back on the bike, but to come back and like beat everybody in all of history of this sport, something's going on here. And I think that's the idea that the film tries to show is like, well, look, we're seeing a lot of him, of Lance Armstrong, and his drive and where he's cutting the corners. And we're even seeing the people that are kind of falling into that orbit and getting mixed up in all that. But then we do have the kind of B plot of the film is David Walsh, the journalist, who's always kind of checking in, keeping tabs, and even to the point where he like just confronts him face to face and can't seem to get any traction. It's just nobody seems to believe like this guy is cheating. Like this is too much of a what do you call it? Like a success story. He came back against the odds, beat illness to become a champion. Everybody wants to admire something like that. Everybody wants to be inspired by that. And this guy, even though in the face of that, he's like, there's still something not right here. So that was, I like that it at least gave us that. It's like not everybody was on the bandwagon. And sometimes it's a journalist that has to be that person to say, I think something else is going on, and to dig and to find out the truth. And so I kind of like this film. I'm not familiar with the cycling world, the Tour de France, all that stuff. I don't follow it as a sport. I know that when Lance Armstrong was on this streak that he was on, it certainly got more attention. Like I remember hearing more about it back in, what was this, like the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I thought, well, this is becoming a thing now in a way. It's like, you have someone that is such a champion in a sense that they break through, they cross over. Someone like a Tiger Woods, like people learned about golf that might have never learned about golf because of Tiger Woods, right? Same thing here. And so I got to say, like, it was an interesting look at some things underneath, like behind the curtain of the cycling world, the athletes that do that, what makes a good athlete. Because there is a portion of the film where we're just seeing someone really trying to push performance. And then we see like where, oh, okay, the needles come out. And now we're into different territory. So I don't know. I kind of liked it. I think, Ben Foster, he always does great work. And I liked him in this. I think they did something a little strange with his, I don't know, makeup or whatever. I guess to make him look a little more like Lance Armstrong. It kind of is distracting in some moments, some parts of the film. But otherwise, I mean, he's certainly committed to the athleticism, to actually pushing the damn bike up the mountain, right? And I think it comes across. So here I've got, let's see, 3 films about journalists and chasing down the stories and kind of fighting against the odds. In some ways, they've all got strengths to them. I think She Said is probably the most important, the most relevant, the farthest reaching story. And the film, I think, has done very well. I like this genre, put it that way. That's where I started, It's like, I like this idea of a journalist who, look, I mean, they're like anybody else. They're like you or I, really. I mean, they're a member of the press, and maybe they have a little bit of extra access. But, look, they're not law enforcement. They're not a government agency. They don't get clearance to do some of these things just by the job they have. Like, they have to work at it. Just like you or I, if we had to like find out the truth behind something and we had to make the right connections, we had to find the right people, We had to put the clues together. I mean, we're doing it just as a private citizen in a sense. And, as a member of the press, like I said, maybe you have a little bit more room to work with, but not a lot. You get just as many doors slammed in your face, right? You hit just as many dead ends. So it's interesting work. It's always intrigued me. And I'm sure there are other films, if I really thought about it, like that tackled this kind of thing, the struggle or the dilemma that the journalists, especially like investigative journalists, people who really have to push to find the facts. There's plenty of films, there's plenty of stories at least about this kind of work. So this is just a few that I found recently. So, all right. I think I'm good for this episode. I just wanted to talk about these for a little bit. I'm going to be back with another episode very soon. And then something big's coming. So stay tuned for that. You can go to filmstreak.com. You can find the list of all of the films I've talked about. Getting close to 400, almost there. You can also find other episodes, of course. Anyway, we'll talk to you later. Have fun, stay safe, and, just do you, right? I'm going to go watch something new.